Okay guys, it's time to make things louder. Hi and welcome to the video. My name is Sam. Welcome to Jamhouse Studios. It's just a room, but I have things. Today I'm going to be talking to you about compression. Now compression is one of the absolutely core effects that all audio engineers use, unless you ask Jack White, for their music. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was a staple to actually record through hardware compressors to tape. This would help even out the audio. So what a compressor actually is, a way that you can think about it is essentially it's an automatic volume fader, okay? That's what a compressor is. So the same way that I could sit here on my volume faders, and when a bit of audio gets too loud for my liking, I can turn it down, and then when it gets a bit quieter, I can turn it back up. Essentially, we can program a machine to do it for us. In the back in the previous days, or even these days still in studios, we have hardware units that we can program to do this for us. There are several different types of compressors, not going to get into that now. The one that we're looking at today is just the stock standard compressor that comes with Pro Tools, the D3 compressor limiter, okay? Now, when we think about a human audio engineer, not a machine one, adjusting the volume, there is actually a lot of parameters going on that we have to take into account, such as at what point do we start turning down the volume? How quickly do we turn down the volume? How long do we keep the volume down for? How long is it before we bring it up? At what rate do we bring the volume back up? Okay, all of these things we can program with our compressor. Okay, so starting off, this is our signal. I'm going to bypass my compressor, even though it isn't set up to actually have anything happening at the moment anyway. I'm going to play back our completely unaffected snare drum audio. Now you can hear it's quite dynamic. Even having a look at our sound waves, we have some quieter hits, some more loud hits, right? And we have quite a bit of dynamic range there. What we can do with a compressor is lower the amount, or lower the distance, okay, between our quiet peaks and our loud peaks, okay? We can even it out. So I'm going to turn my compressor on. Now in its current state, it isn't going to do anything. The first two things that we need to consider are our threshold, okay, and our ratio. So our threshold determines when we want to start compressing, all right? So when do we want to start pulling that volume dial down? The second parameter is our ratio, and that is that determines how much do we want to pull that volume fader down, okay? So I'm going to start off by bringing my threshold down, okay? You can see our little graph there changes, and we currently will really smack the heck out of this. We'll set it to -40, all right? So any bit of signal that bounces up above -40 will be compressed. Now, I haven't touched the ratio yet, so you'll be able to see how much audio is going on. Let's actually pay attention to that first. All right, tell you what, I might wind it up a little bit more there, so you can have a look. There we go. All right. So that'll be nipping off some of the peaks and bits and pieces. Now, it's not compressing at the moment. Don't panic if you didn't hear any difference, because our ratio has not changed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play this back on loop, and I'm going to slowly wind our ratio up, and you'll hear it go from no compression to some mild compression to absolutely limiting. All right. Limiting is essentially when we have a ratio of infinity to 1, which I think it winds up that much, and no audio will be allowed to get above that threshold. We also might need to dial in some other parameters to make sure it hits that hard. Right, now you might have noticed predominantly that the tonality of the snare changed. Let's listen back to that. Brings out some different sounds. Now I know what you're thinking. Sam, you said that we were going to make things loud. That's not louder, that's quieter. Well, you're right. That's because there is still one part of the compressor that we need to take into account to make things actually be louder. That's what we call our makeup gain, okay? And that's this lovely red dial over here. So instead of not pushing the red button, we're going to push the red button and dial it up, okay? So over here we have our gain reduction meter, okay? We can see how much we are compressing at the moment, and I'm going to bring our gain up. Alright, bypassed, bring it back in. Can hear it's got more punch about it now, right? It feels like the snare's starting to punch through the mix a bit more, okay? Now, we still have a couple of other parameters over here. Our attack determines how quickly we want to bring that volume fader down. I can set it all the way down to not a millisecond, is that a microsecond? I think milliseconds, microseconds, right? That means that it will start compressing essentially immediately, right? Let's play it back. And I'll wind our attack up. Now let's have a listen to, so I've got our input and output almost matched there. Gonna bypass it again. Let's have a listen back. Right, now I am overcooking it just so you can hear it a little bit more, right? Now, our release determines how long we compress for. Currently, we've got it set to 80 milliseconds. So that's from the point at which the audio gets back past the threshold, how long does it take for the volume fader to come back up? So I'll wind this one once again all the way down to 5 milliseconds. We'll have a listen and compare as I wind it back up. Right, 4 seconds, that's a long release, right? So we're essentially going to be compressing the entire time. Now, if I wind this back down, now once again, I am overcooking it just so I can demonstrate the differences, okay? Gonna play around with the gain dial now to try and even out that sound again. Bypassed, and back in. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to demonstrate what the actual waveforms look like post-compression. Okay, so I'm going to make sure this is set up to really overcook the compressor, really slam it, okay? And then we can have a look at the difference in the waveforms afterwards, okay? I've already routed things. I've got my second channel here set up with comp, right? And let's have a look at this. No, I don't. I need to set up my bus. What a stitch up. All right, sending to bus 1 now, and let's go. Now you can see here, the waveform is a lot more uniform, right? The tonality has also changed, so the actual waveforms themselves have changed, okay? Tonality and the shape of the wave, right, all changed. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to gain this up, and I'll show you how we can make this louder. And let's get it loop in a second. Right, let's go for it. Right, so now instead of having our dynamics, we have very essentially flattened out peaks, right? And that's more so limiting rather than compression, okay? Once again, I'm overcooking it to show you guys, make sure that we can hear the differences there, okay? So once again, I'll turn off our compressor and our bus, and now I can flick between these two and show you guys the differences again. Something else we can do is actually blend the signals together. So I'm going to have this looping and slowly bring in my compressed signal over the top of our uncompressed signal, and you'll hear how the characteristic, the extra dynamics and stuff really add to the punch overall. Now I know what you're thinking, it's like, oh, I feel like I'm missing that attack, that initial real snap of the snare, right? You don't need to panic. You can get that back quite easily, okay? It doesn't matter all that much if it disappears at one point in time. You can always bring it back by adjusting your compressor settings. Just wind your attack back a little bit more so that you have a slower attack on your transients, all right? But that's also where it's important to bear in mind the type of compressor you're using. With a digital compressor like this one, you have those adjustments. With some other compressors, such as your Fairchild emulations, they won't have an attack, all right? I don't even think they have a release setting, all right? Or knowing your 1176 by nature, even its slowest attack is still a very quick attack, all right? Or if it's a tube type compressor, right? Or an optical type compressor, it will have a naturally slower attack. These are sort of your hardware emulations, right? And then you've also got your FET style compressor, all right, which generally a lot quicker, all right? I think that about does us for today. Hope you learned something. Go and make things louder. Just make sure that you use these tools appropriately, all right? You don't need to slam the ever-living heck out of your snare drum like I just did there, all right? Make sure you use it in a tasteful manner to try and bring a little bit more tonality and punch out instead of squashing the life out of everything, okay? Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one.